tried to do is to honor our living legends in every region of the country. And we also wanted to honor and recognize those extraordinary members of the National Bar Association who have been trailblazers, and also in cases like Oklahoma, where there's such a tremendous history in terms of African Americans and what we've accomplished. And we've all heard about Black Wall Street. And so we have the distinct pleasure this evening of recognizing the extraordinary contributions of many in Region 10, and that would cover, of course, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Utah. It gives me a particular delight to recognize those members of our bar from this region, because this is a region that I feel we need to highlight more because of the extraordinary talent emanating from this region. And so against that backdrop, I wanted to first thank Taise for putting this program together, for her extraordinary work. She's a deputy chief of staff and working with the Kuatapak, and she's just one of those soldiers who you want by your side when you need to get something done. Taise, I can never say thank you enough for all the work you've done. To our chaplain, who's in the Atlanta metropolitan area, Sonia Natasha Brown, Judge Sonia Natasha Brown, I wanted to thank you for all that you do, all that you're about to do. You're about to serenade us and set the table for our recognition of living legends. So against that backdrop, why don't we get started with the program? And I'd like to introduce and bring on Madam Chaplain of the National Bar Association.
Thank you, Madam President. How wonderful it is to be in the presence of all this greatness and to be here with Region 10. And so I just want to thank you, Madam President, for your leadership and all that you do in this extraordinary time that we are in. And so with that, let us go to the throne of God in prayer. Oh, most gracious and wonderful Father, we just come right now first to pause and say thank you. We lift you up and just honor you and glorify your name on this evening today. We come being so ever grateful, so ever thankful to have an opportunity to be together once again, to have an opportunity to lift up those who operate in excellence and to be amongst those who are considered the living legends, the greatest of the greatest. The example that they set for us, let it be a reminder that we are called to a greater work, not just to be in the law profession, to seek honor and to seek financial gain, but to do good unto others and to do good for others. I thank you for this moment in time where we have the opportunity to recognize those who have been doing the work before us and to encourage those who come behind us to continue to run the good race. I pray for our president, Madam C.K. Hoffler, who has led in an extraordinary way in these unprecedented times. May you continue to bless her, to keep her, to honor her steps, and to guide her path. We lift her up, we undergird her, and we will keep her in our thoughts and our prayers as she continues to lead us. I pray that you will be present in the midst of this evening, and all that will be done, all that will be said, will be done for your glory and for your honor. It is in your name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Brown, for an amazing opening prayer.
Taisha.
I'm just going to briefly mention, oh, yes.
If I could just make a correction.
Yes, President.
Well, I mentioned Region 10, and how could I forget this? Because my oldest son is going to be headed to Region 10 for college at Kansas State. That also includes Colorado, Kansas. I talked about New Mexico. I talked about Oklahoma. I talked about Utah, but I didn't talk about Wyoming. So I just wanted to correct that. Region 10, I just wanted to give y'all a flavor in the beginning to make sure y'all were paying attention. See, that's what it was. I want to make sure y'all were paying attention. And I just also wanted to recognize our extraordinary executive director, or our regional director, Taise, I don't know if I pronounced your first name correctly, Dempsey. And thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you for being the regional director of Region 10. And then I know that there's an extraordinary civil rights lawyer. You know, now it's really in vogue, as we know, to do civil rights work. but it wasn't always in vogue. And by the way, for those that are on the front lines, it's hard work, it's tough work. And we know that they're all National Bar Association members, but I had the distinct pleasure of serving on a panel with a dynamic, extraordinary, wonderful, and gifted lawyer who leaves no stones unturned, and that would be Demario Solomon Simmons. So I just wanted to recognize you. Thank you. You're doing a presentation today. I know you are. And to the honorees, when we talk about living legends, and Taise, I know I've just, changed the program altogether, but I just had to say this. When we talk about living legends, my mother and my grandmother always told me, recognize those who have distinguished themselves and done well while they're alive, because one day we all have to go that way. We can't stay in this world forever, but give us the glory when we're alive. And that's what we're doing at the NBA tonight. And so to Judge Shauna Graves Robertson, who was the chair of the Judicial Council, who served on the Board of Governors honorably, who's been a trailblazer, a dynamic woman whose shoulders many of us stand on, we salute you. To Judge Shamrad Henderson, I don't know if I pronounced the name correctly, but Judge Henderson, we thank you. I want to say Shamara Henderson. We thank you for all of the work that we do. When I look at you, I think of you being one of the younger, trailblazing, dynamic judges who are just doing what you do so magnificently. And we thank you so much for that. To Dean Matheson, for the trailblazing work that you have done in your community, and we're going to hear more about that. I want to say thank you to you and to Justice Colbert. What can we say, Justice Colbert? We want to thank you for all of the work that you do, that you're doing now and will continue to do in inspiring and gracing our community and representing for all of you, the National Bar Association, so extraordinarily well. So now, Taisha Miley, our Deputy Chief of Staff, now we can officially begin the program, because I just wanted to see that everybody was paying attention. See, that's what it was. And I also want to thank Kyle and Priscilla for their great work that they do as well.
Thank you so much. Just briefly, I want to inform the attendees who are present today, and to also, if you are present, to spread the word to others, that this year, President Hoffler is putting on an international summit. The dates for that are May 12th through the 14th. As you can see on your screen, the presentation flyer is there. Please register for the program. Please notify students that it is free for them. So encourage the law students and other students in your area and across the country to attend this program. As you know, the availability of assignments internationally and other work is certainly expanding for our community. I'm not certain what happened to my there we go. I'm not sure what happened to my screen, but thank you, Kyle, for making sure that the information was there. Please continue to spread the word about the International Summit. It promises to be 3 days of great programming. And please, please encourage people to register and at the National Bar's website, nationalbar.org. I turn the program over now to the Regional 10 Director, Taise Dempsey. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Taise Dempsey, and I serve as the Region 10 Director of the National Bar Association. I just want to thank you all for joining us this evening as we discuss a very important topic and honor our Region 10 legends. Tonight's presentation has been approved for 1 hour of CLE in Oklahoma. So if you're an Oklahoman attorney, at the conclusion of this presentation, please confirm your participation by sending an email to oklahomacityabl@gmail.com and providing your Oklahoma bar number and the code Tulsa 1921. And this information will be shared in the chat for you as a reminder. In just a few weeks, Tulsa, Oklahoma will observe the 100-year commemoration of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. 100 years later, the fight for justice for the people of the Greenwood community, including the survivors and descendants of the massacre, still continues. Demario Solomon Simmons has been leading that fight, and I'm honored to have him with us this evening to discuss the ongoing litigation on behalf of the Tulsa Greenwood community. Growing up in a single mom household, Demario struggled for years to find himself as a Black man in America. He graduated at the bottom of his high school class and was a college dropout before becoming a University of Oklahoma football letterman, graduating with honors with his bachelor's degree in African and African American studies, master's in adult and higher education, and becoming the University of Oklahoma's College of Law's first African American recipient of the Joel Jankowski Award for the Outstanding Law Graduate. He has been a practicing attorney for almost 17 years and currently is the managing partner of Solomon Simmons Law, an Oklahoma-based law firm where he specializes in civil and human rights, wrongful death, employment discrimination, public policy, and sports law. He has a nationwide practice and has presented dozens of high-profile clients and causes, including advocating for reparations for the survivors of the 1921 Greenwood Massacre, citizenship rights of Black Creek Indians, and managing the business and legal affairs for several NFL and Olympic athletes. Currently, Demario serves as lead counsel for the 3 known survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre: 13 Black former University of Iowa football players against the state of Iowa, several families of unarmed Black men unjustly killed by the police, and for 7 Black female rape victims of convicted Oklahoma City police officer Daniel Holtzclaw. In addition to being a 2014 National Booker T. Washington High School Hall of Fame inductee, in 2015, the Oklahoma Bar Association named Demario its recipient of their Ada Lois Scipio Fisher Diversity Award. In 2016, the National Bar Association named Demario one of the top 40 under 40 lawyers nationally. And in 2017, Tulsa People magazine named Demario Tulsan of the Year. Recently, he was named to OZY.com's 25 Rising Stars to Track in 2021. A list of those include U.S. Representative Ayanna Pressley and hip-hop superstar Sweetie. Outside of law, Demario is the co-founder and executive director of the Justice for Greenwood Foundation, whose mission is to obtain justice and reparations for the victims of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre through innovative legal strategies, public education, and advocacy. He is also co-founder of the MVP Foundation, whose mission is to inform, inspire, and empower 8th grade boys from single mom households. In addition, he's on the board of visitors of OU's Claire Luper African and African American Studies Department program. Demario is a highly sought after speaker and frequent media guest. Demario is also passionately in love with his high school sweetheart, wife, and business partner, Mia, and they live in Tulsa, where he is a member of Metropolitan Baptist Church and the Xi Omega chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Before Demario speaks, I would also like to thank the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice at Harvard Law School for co-sponsoring this event, and introduce Mr. David Harris, the Managing Director of the Institute, to discuss their efforts in supporting the Justice for Greenwood Foundation.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. I'm deeply honored to be with you today, and I wanted to actually spend a moment thanking you on behalf of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute. We've been supportive of Demario's work and this effort, and we're really glad to be part of it. As you all know, our institute was founded by Charles J. Ogletree Jr. in 2005. Some of you may know him as Charles or others as Tree, many as Professor Ogletree. But by whatever name you know him, I'm sure you recognize and appreciate the combination of compassion and determination he brought to all of his work, from Anita Hill to Troy Davis to Buju Banton, and so many other individuals and causes, whether in the courtroom, the classroom, or the steps of City Hall. But I'm here tonight to join you in an appreciation for an effort he brought to the cause of reparations for victims and descendants of the Greenwood Massacre. The very first large event the Houston Institute did in 2006 was a reconsideration of the Dred Scott decision on its 150th anniversary. That was a remarkable event with the likes of John Payton, Derek Bell, Robert Carter, Ann Williams, Allison Duncan, Damon Keith, all participated in a re-argument of the case before a panel of distinguished circuit court judges presided over by Justice Stephen Breyer. Important and impressive as that event was, and it was, the most riveting part of the day was a special panel of Tulsa survivors, Wes Young and Otis Clark, then 90 and 104 years old, respectively. This was, of course, in the midst of the effort to adjudicate the case, but for Tree, the law was always about people, and for him and all of those in the audience, having those two survivors in our presence was an inspiration none would forget. He continued his work on a larger effort for reparations for years, always insisting that the law must be informed and guided by basic, simple respect for human dignity. But for him, the question of reparations was very much about repair. And thus he would emphasize the mandate to address the needs of what he called affectionately but powerfully, the bottom stuck. Those whose lives and fates were so easily and consistently ignored or overlooked by so many for so long. And so today, as the world claims to be woke and the R word has crept into polite conversation, let us always remember and embody the living example of Charles Ogletree. We at the Houston Institute seek to carry on his work and the work of Charles Hamilton Houston himself before him. Our work centers around the notion of community justice, with an understanding of justice as to be made whole, a form of repair and restoration for individuals and communities. As such, I'm sure I speak for Tree in commending DeMario and the team for the brilliant and determined path they continue to blaze for us. And with that, I want to again express my appreciation and thanks to join you today, and I look forward to hearing DeMario's presentation. Thank you.
If I could, DeMario, just 1 second. I just hate this when I'm taking this moment of personal privilege when I really probably should be quiet. But when we say Tree, when we say Charles Ogletree, when we talk about, you talk about a legend and an extraordinary National Bar Association member. I had the pleasure of being his co-counsel on multiple cases. And with the reparations lawsuit that was filed, I was a partner in Willie Gary's office at the time, and we joined in the litigation with Johnny Cochran, with Tree, and so many. So when you say Tree, I just can't resist. I just could not let another moment pass without saying that his contributions to Black lawyers, to Harvard Law School, and to this country are unparalleled. And so I just want to say, for me, as a matter of personal privilege, I want to dedicate this town hall meeting to Charles Ogletree. And I want him to know that we at the National Bar Association never, 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 and I mean, as my kids say, no, never, will ever forget his extraordinary contributions. Okay, DeMario, I'm going to keep my on mute. I'm not going to interrupt again. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Harris, for staying.
Oh, thank you so much for Taise and Brother David. Dr. Ogletree, I always call him Dr. Ogletree, even though I know he was such an inspiration. In fact, his picture sits right next to me right here. And I'm glad you dedicate this to him, because David and we wanted to do that. And so it's a pleasure for me to be here with everyone and talk about an issue that's been so important in my life for the last 25 years, as a native of North Tulsa and this struggle. And so I have a presentation that I'm very excited to provide. But first I want to just say before I go to the full screen is I definitely want to thank the bar for this opportunity to speak to everyone. And President Hoffler, the work that you're doing during this pandemic is amazing. And I just want to say, I always feel so wonderful. I see the two brothers on the screen. When I'm in a company of so many powerful Black women, there's safety. There is safety in the company of powerful Black women. I say that with all sincerity. So let's get going here. As I know I like to say I'm from the church, I won't be long, but I got to be strong. I hope that's going to be okay with everyone. But I was going to start off with Dr. Ogletree myself. And so this is me back 17 years ago as a baby lawyer sitting at the feet at Professor Ogletree, and that's Dr. John Hope Franklin. And we were sitting at the feet. In fact, I was a third-year law student at this time as the National Black Law Student Association Reparations Director, and got an opportunity to work with all of you great lawyers at the time, with Willie Gary and Michelle Roberts and Audra Altour and so many other great lawyers. So we definitely honor in the work that we're doing. It's just we're standing on the shoulders, even on the shoulders of Dr. John Hope Franklin's father, B.C. Franklin, who filed one of the very first lawsuits related to this issue back in 1921. So let's get into it. What we're talking about here, for anyone that does not know, is the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. We're talking about complete devastation of my community that happened 100 years ago in just a few weeks. But it's not just about what happened 100 years ago. We're going to talk about that, but the continuing harm. But what happened in my community, what happened to my people, is the worst race massacre atrocity to Black people since the end of enslavement. We're talking about 300 plus Black people that were killed. We probably really never know that number, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. This number, $50 to $100 million in today's dollars in real estate and personal property, has actually been recently updated to around about $200 million. 40 blocks destroyed, and 100 years of continuing harm. So what my goal is tonight in my limited amount of time is to really give you an overview of what it was that made Greenwood, what it was like to live in Greenwood, the destruction and the massacre, the continuing harm, and what we're doing to try to get justice, and how you can help us finally get justice for our people. Real quickly, what created Greenwood? And it's important that we understand this so we can understand the totality and what was actually lost. Greenwood was such a unique place because it possessed three main ingredients: one being a freedom mind state, two being tremendous land ownership for Black people, and three with wealth and innovation concentration. And what do I mean by that when I say land ownership? We got to go way back and figure out that Oklahoma's, although people don't think about Oklahoma as a Black state now or a Black place, Oklahoma was probably the Blackest state in the history of this union, because you got to go back to the 1830s when people came on what's called the Trail of Tears. And many of those people look like myself. My family was on the Trail of Tears. I'm of Creek Indian descent. And these Black people came into Oklahoma Territory, or then at the time called Indian Territory. And some were enslaved by the Indian nations and some were free. But by 1866, at the end of the Civil War, these nations had freed all of the enslaved Africans. And so you had about 50 years of Black people, particularly in Northeast Oklahoma, where Tulsa's located, where Black people lived as free individuals, first-class citizens that owned land, mineral rights, education, and so they had a freedom mind state. And right before Oklahoma statehood, people don't know this, but Oklahoma came into the Union as a Black state. And here where my cursor is around Tulsa, you see all these Black towns. And these Black towns were filled with thousands of Black people who were there with a freedom mind state, who owned land and had wealth. And this wealth was most concentrated, most beautiful in Tulsa, in Greenwood. This map I'm showing you that shows historic Greenwood before the massacre, everything you see in gray is Greenwood, a Black owned and operated land. 4 square miles, 40 blocks of land. Now, what you got to remember, Greenwood was a community of about 10 to 12,000 people. But at any time, there may be 15 to 20,000 people in Greenwood, because all those Black towns considered Greenwood to be the city. Like when you go to New York, they talk about Manhattan as the city. Well, Greenwood was the city where these Blacks could come in and enjoy a first-class, top-of-the-line, metropolitan location and experience. And let's talk about that a little bit more. We talk about what are the demographics of Greenwood. I love this picture. This is a picture of John and Lula Williams and their young son, Bill Williams. This picture is from 1912, and this is their brand new vehicle. And these were some of the most prominent people in Greenwood. But what was it like to live in Greenwood? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the wealth, the professionals. I want to be really clear. Not everyone was rich. I'm not trying to give you that impression, but it was a rich community. It was a community that had more professionals per capita than any other community for Black people in the nation. It was a community that had several multimillionaires. It was a community where you had 6 Black families that owned their own planes. Now, I know a lot of rich and famous people, but I don't know 6 Black families that own their own planes. These people own their own planes. This picture of this house you see is a typical house you will see in Greenwood, 2-story. In fact, many people had brick homes. These people had pride. These people felt good about themselves. These people had land and a freedom mind state, and they had wealth. And so I want to just highlight 3 of the most prominent businesses in Greenwood out of the hundreds. This is the Williams Dreamland Hotel. And you saw the Williams, that was a picture I showed you with the car, with the man and woman and young son. Many people heard about the Dreamland Hotel because of the Watchmen movie that highlighted the Dreamland Hotel. What you may not have understood is that the Dreamland was the Apollo. The Dreamland was the place in Black America that you needed to play to make sure that if you said you was a star. This was considered the most luxurious and finest theater in all of Black America. Then you had the Stratfor Hotel. Now this has a lot of significance for us as a people and a lot of significance for us as Black lawyers. Number one, J.B. Stratfor was an attorney. His name, J.B. Stratfor, stood for John the Baptist. J.B. Stratfor's hotel was considered the largest and most luxurious Black-owned hotel in the United States of America. J.B. Stratfor was also the wealthiest man in Greenwood. He was a multimillionaire. And J.B. Stratfor's son is someone you may have heard of before. His name was C.F. Stratfor, who's a co-founder of the National Bar Association. That's right. Once again, Tulsa and Black Wall Street and Black people from Oklahoma are all over the place. They were founders of the National Bar Association. J.B. Stratfor, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I represent some of his descendants. He was run out of Tulsa during the massacre. They literally tried to lynch him and tried to bring him back for the rest of his life, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The last business I want to highlight is the Tulsa Star newspaper, which is also owned by another lawyer, Attorney A.J. Smitherman. Attorney A.J. Smitherman's Tulsa Star, a newspaper, is considered the very first African-American newspaper to have a national circulation. That's right, the very first one from little old Tulsa. Black folks was doing it big in Tulsa, Greenwood. They had homes, they had businesses, they had wealth, innovation, and they had a freedom mind state. Unfortunately, A.J. Smitherman lost everything during the massacre. He also was run out of town. He also was pursued with indictments for his whole entire life. Now, my time is short, so I have to go fast. So I've told you what made Greenwood. I've already told you a little bit about living in Greenwood. Let's talk a little bit about the destruction of Greenwood. And many of you have already seen many of these pictures. You already know this history, but I always gotta say, I give you a disclaimer. Some of these pictures may be triggering. You're gonna see some dead bodies here, but this is what happened to our people. And we have to really understand what we are fighting for. As David said about Professor Ogletree, the law is about the people impacted. And these are the people that were impacted that you're gonna see. And these are people from my community. These are people whose descendants are still right here suffering. But how did it happen? Well, as we know throughout our history in this country, so many Black people and Black communities have been destroyed because of false allegations of Black man assaulting a white woman. And that's exactly what happened here in Tulsa. You had a false story of this brother, Dick Rowland, who was a 19-year-old shoeshine boy. That's the terminology they used back then. And he was trying to go to a restroom, gets into an elevator. The story goes that there was a white elevator operator, Sarah Page, young white woman. And She supposedly made a sound, screamed something, and someone called the police and said he assaulted her. Now we have information that says that Sarah Page and Dick Rowland were actually lovers and et cetera, but that's for another lecture. The point is, all it took was this false allegation, because what you have to understand is that the white people in Tulsa hated, resented, despised the successful Black people in Greenwood. They despised the fact that they had a freedom mind state. They despised the fact that they owned lots of and prime real estate. And they despised the fact that they had wealth. And they wanted to teach them a lesson. And more importantly, they wanted their wealth and wanted their land and to drive them out of Tulsa. And so they utilized this false accusation to finally say, this is the opportunity, guys. And with that accusation happened, what's going on with my computer? There we go. And that newspaper publicized that bold statement that said "nab Negro." They also publicized an article that now has been lost to history, said there will be a Negro lynch tonight. A large crowd of bloodthirsty white men showed up at the courthouse. Up to 2,000 of these white men calling for the death of Dick Rowland, calling for the murder of Dick Rowland, calling for the hanging and the lynching of Dick Rowland. And as this was going on, you got to think about the Black men in Greenwood who had a freedom mind state, who felt so strong about their community that 60 to 70 of the most prominent members of Greenwood, including J.B. Stratford, including A.J. Smitherman, went down to the courthouse, dressed in their suits, with their guns, and went to the sheriff and said, listen, we're here to volunteer ourselves to protect the life of Dick Rowland. Now imagine that. First of all, Dick Rowland was no major figure in Greenwood. He was a shoe shine. But the fact that these people love their community so much, they said, we're not going to let the shoe shine boy be lynched in our presence. That's one of the reasons I'm so proud to be from Greenwood, that spirit that we will stand up. You can only imagine what the crowd of white men, how they felt seeing these brothers. And as the story goes, tensions went high, and one of these white men said, nigga, what you doing with that gun? Tried to take the gun, and a shot rang out, and all hell breaks loose. At this point, the Black men retreat back into Greenwood, and what does the government do? What does the city of Tulsa do? What does Tulsa County do? What does the chamber do? They deputize, they authorize these white men to be deputies and authorize them to invade Greenwood. They armed them or allowed them to be armed. In fact, we have eyewitness testimony of whites and of Walter White. If you ever heard of him, he was an NAACP longtime executive who looked like a white man. He was in Tulsa at the time, and he actually got himself deputized and talked about how the white men, once they received their deputization, said, now we can kill any nigger we want to, and the law is behind us. And so these white men invaded into Greenwood, and they poured into Greenwood, and the Black men of Greenwood set up a defensive perimeter. And they held these white men off for about 6 to 8 hours. But the white men, they were just simply outgunned and outmanned, the brothers were. And finally, the white men started to break through. And as they did, they started to loot. And remember, they didn't just burn, as you see on this picture, burn houses. They looted first. They took the valuables of the Black people. They took their money. They stole their furniture. They looted anything that was of value. In fact, some of our survivors, like Otis Clark that David talked about, they talked about later in life, going into white homes in Tulsa and seeing things that were stolen from their home, stolen from their neighbors, because they wanted the wealth of the Black folks. It wasn't just this melee. This was an orchestrated massacre to destroy our people completely. And as these Black men, one by one, were killed, fighting for their community, fighting for their families, fighting for their children, the National Guard was called in. And the National Guard had a mandate. Their mandate was to protect Greenwood. But do you think they protected Greenwood? Do you think they stopped the melee? Absolutely not. Hell no. What did they do? They got involved with their machine guns. And it was their machine guns that finally mowed down the last remnants of the Black protection. And once they got that machine gun and they were able to let everybody pour in at the height of the massacre, according to the National Guard, there were 20 to 25,000 white men rampaging in Greenwood. Let's just think about that. We witnessed on January 6th about 1,000 people rampaging the Capitol. Imagine 20 times what we watched on January 6th, rampaging this innocent Black community, looting, killing, raping, maiming, destroying everything in their path. And this was the result of it. Total devastation. This was the result of it. Total devastation of the businesses built for our lifetime. This is the result of it. People losing everything. People losing everything. You see this church here, this big structure here. This is Mount Zion Baptist Church. They had just built that church 3 to 4 weeks before the massacre. And when that church was burnt down to the ground, as you see it, they had to continue to pay the mortgage on that church while they had to pay for the new church that they had to build. This is the legacy of Tulsa. Businesses built over a lifetime, destroyed in 24 hours. And this is why we say, this is why it is a fact that the property damage is $50 to $200 million in today's dollars. But we lost more than property, right? We lost life. We lost people. We lost mothers. We lost fathers. We lost sons. We lost brothers. We lost neighbors. We lost friends. We will never really know how many people died. We will never really know the magnitude of the loss. And we know that to be true because even our survivors, again, I'll reference Otis Clark because he was our oldest living survivor. He was 18 years old at the time of the massacre. He lived to be 109 years old. And they all tell the story of losing people and not knowing what happened to them. They all tell the story of not understanding what happened to as Otis Clark, his stepfather. He never saw him again. They don't know if he was lynched. They don't know if he was burnt. They don't know if he was buried alive. They just know we never saw him again. He never saw the Tolberts, an old couple that lived across the street from him. He said, I never saw him again, but their house was gone. It just didn't even exist anymore. He talked about going to his home and it being nothing but rubble, and he and his family trying to salvage something and thinking about their old bulldog that they never saw again. And he would always tear up about the bulldog and say, I know he fought to save our house. We lost property. We lost people, but we lost even something worse than losing people. We lost human capacity. We lost legacy. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Dr. A.C. Jackson was considered the, quote, finest Negro surgeon in the nation at the time. He was the founder of the Booker T. Washington Hospital in Tulsa. A man so respected, he was the president of the Oklahoma Medical Association, not the black one, the white one. This man was an amazing physician. This man actually created tools that are allegedly still in use today. During the massacre, he was working nonstop, tending to the injured from his community, till he was at exhaustion. And he decided, I need to go home. I just got to rest for just a little bit. And as he's going home to his beautiful 2-story home on Detroit Avenue, he was accosted by about 3 or 4 of these white terrorists. And we know this story by a white judge, Judge Oliphant, who's saying what I'm telling you, who recorded what I'm telling you. And as these 3 or 4 white terrorists accosted Dr. Jackson, he raised his hand and said, boys, you got me, I'm unarmed. And this white judge said, hey guys, that's Dr. Jackson, don't harm him. And one of those white terrorists said, we don't give a damn who this nigga is. And they shot him not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. And Dr. Jackson, the greatest Black surgeon in America at the time, bled out to death over a 5 to 6 hour period in the concentration camps that they put our people in. He died without any children. So not only did we lose this brilliant surgeon, but we lost a legacy. We lost what he would have brought not only to our community in Tulsa, but our whole Black community around this nation. This was the whole purpose of the massacre. They hoped to destroy us completely. But it wasn't enough for them to just do the massacre aspect of it. The immediate aftermath, and this is a tent. This tent you're looking at is the type of tents that our people lived in for up to 18 months, those who survived and those who were not run out as refugees. But they captured us, as this postcard says. They humiliated us, marched us through the street with our hands up. How familiar is that? Taking us to what they call concentration camps. That's not my word, that's the words that they used here in Tulsa in 1921. Putting our people in there for up to 18 months. And while you were in these camps and you wanted to leave, guess what? You had to have a green card that was paid for by the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce. And guess what? That green card had to be filled out by who? A white person. A white person that said they will be responsible for you. And if you didn't have a white person to sponsor you out, guess what? The men, they had to go out and work as enslaved Africans, cleaning up the rubble of their own community for no pay. That's right, they re-enslaved us. Then they falsely labeled it a riot to do two things: to make themselves not look as bad, and then number two, to make sure we couldn't collect on our insurance claims. There was over 1,400 claims made by the Black people of Tulsa who had done what they tell us to do, right? Pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, do for self, blah, blah, blah. We did it. We've had insurance. We paid our premiums. But when it came time to collect, they denied us. This picture right here always does something to me because I can only imagine what this young child experienced, not just during the massacre, but the rest of his life, as he's holding this picture of his young sibling in this tent that they probably lived in behind them. They probably went from a brick two-story building home to a tent. But that's not all Tulsa did to us in the immediate aftermath. Then they built the largest KKK clavering right next to Greenwood to continue to harass us, continue to drive people out of Tulsa. And then we have this 100 years of continuing harm where they willfully neglected the community, urban removal, and the creation of ghetto conditions, all with the hope to completely, can you read this? Running the Negro out of Tulsa. That was the goal. That is still the goal of the people in Tulsa. And when I talk about willful neglect, I'm talking about after the massacre, the city of Tulsa up until the 1950s refused to put paved streets in certain parts of Greenwood, refused to provide actual plumbing to certain parts of Greenwood so you could have indoor plumbing because they wanted to make it so terrible for us because they wanted the land. And remember I showed you this map early on. I showed you all the land that the Black folks own that was in gray. You remember that? Yeah, shake your head. Yeah, you remember that. Now look at this little circle here, this little circle here. Now look inside the circle, this little pink block. That's all that's left of Black Wall Street. That's all that's left. So out of 40 blocks, all that Black people own is half a block. And so now they want to talk about the resurgence in Greenwood. It's all white owned. It's all white business owners. It's the same people that destroyed us. We don't own this. We own this little bitty piece. And that's why in Tulsa, we call urban renewal Negro removal. And this is a picture so you can see. You can see this highway that they rammed through our community in the 60s, like they did so many places around this nation. They rammed this highway intentionally to finally destroy any remnants of Greenwood. Because every time the Black folks would try to rebuild a little bit, scrap things together, get it back going, they would come in and make sure, hey, we don't want you Negroes here. We don't appreciate who you are. We don't want you to ever have Black Wall Street again. And you look at this picture, here's the picture of Mount Zion Church I showed you that was destroyed and rebuilt. This is a Black-owned church, and then over here, it's a Black-owned church. Everything else you see is owned by white people that used to be Black-owned. It's owned by the city of Tulsa. It's owned by Oklahoma State University. It's owned by the state. It's owned by Tulsa Development Authority. And because of this, our people are suffering. They kicked us further back north and created these ghetto conditions. And when I say ghetto conditions, I mean ghetto conditions. I mean Black people in Tulsa live in, 35% of Black folks in Tulsa live in poverty. Black people in Tulsa live 11 to 14 years less than white Tulsans. Black people in Tulsa, the wealth disparity gap is humongous. Black people in Tulsa, we own our homes 2 times less than white people own their homes. These type of disparities did not exist before the massacre. And maybe you won't believe me, I'm just a Black country lawyer, but maybe you'll believe this video from NBC News about the conditions that the massacre left for Black people in Tulsa.
Here in Tulsa, a tale of two cities.
The north side has been left behind, while the south side has grown economically.
Two neighborhoods just miles apart, but the inequality between them is massive.
Is this common, buildings like this that are dilapidated, broken down here in North Tulsa?
Absolutely.
Nehemiah Frank is the editor-in-chief of the Black Wall Street Times. He has studied the divide for years.
This plaza used to be a grocery store.
About half of the city's Black population lives in North Tulsa, an area where 33% of the population lives below the poverty line. But just miles down the road, South Tulsa is more than 70% white and has twice the median household income.
Are there things that South Tulsa has that North Tulsa does not?
South Tulsa has better schools. Our schools are essentially school-to-prison pipelines.
It's a divide that dates back centuries, perhaps most vividly culminating in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, when a group of white residents burned and destroyed the historic Greenwood district, more than 30 blocks of Black homes and businesses, commonly referred to as Black Wall Street. An area that is still being rebuilt almost 100 years later.
Does that 1921 race massacre still impact Tulsa today?
Yeah, it still impacts us. We never rebuilt, we never recuperated all the business that was lost. Looks like 1921.
That divide affects more than just the residents' livelihoods. It also affects their health. Studies show that residents in wealthier South Tulsa are expected to live 11 years longer than those in North Tulsa. Dr. Gibran Pasha sees huge disparities between his patients.
If you grew up in North Tulsa, certain parts of North Tulsa, you are more likely to have a stroke. You're more likely to suffer from heart disease, to die at a younger age. And for any physician, that really should set some alarms off.
Alarms that many residents say should mark the beginning of a new era. Here in
So with that being the case, I've shown you what made Greenwood. I've shown you what it was like to live in Greenwood. I've shown you a little bit of destruction of Greenwood and the aftermath and the continued harm. You must understand that there's been no arrests made, no convictions, and no reparations made. There also has never, ever, ever been an opportunity for our people to have this case adjudicated on its merits in the Oklahoma court system. All the cases that were filed in the 1920s were all dismissed, never were able to move forward. Obviously, the case we talked about with President Hoffler and Johnny Cochran and Charles Ogletree, the best we could offer, that case was dismissed based upon nothing but racism, right? But we're moving forward. We're not dead. We haven't won yet, but we're still fighting. And that's why I'm so excited that we're here talking about this and talking about what we're doing. But you would think, right, that the city of Tulsa would say, we want to do the right thing. You would think that the city of Tulsa would want to make sure these three living survivors, the only three survivors, would finally get some justice. But every other person that was impacted personally by the massacre has died. And these three wonderful people, every time I see them, it just does something to me, because I don't want them to die like everyone else without justice. We have, to my left, Mother Leslie Benefield Randall. We call her Mother Randall. She's 106 years old. In the middle, we have our only known male living survivor, Hughes Van Ellis. He's 100 years old. We call him Uncle Red. And his big sister is Viola Fletcher. We call her Mother Fletcher. She's 106 years old, and she will be 107 in 2 weeks on May 10th. I was with Mr. Hughes, Uncle Red, and Mother Fletcher yesterday. They did an interview. They're in great health, great spirits. Mother Randall, please pray for her. She has not been feeling well. And, we just want her to hold on because we want to get justice for her. But when we call for justice, when we call for respect and we call for reparations here in the city of Tulsa, the city does not want to do the right thing, even though the city will admit that what happened was murder. This is the city of Tulsa's mayor, Mayor G.T. Bynum.
This is a murder investigation. One of the most basic things any city government should offer its citizens is that if you're murdered, we will do everything we can to try and find out what happened to you. And it really bothers me that in 1921 we had a city that didn't do that.
Yeah, but does it really bother him? Because when we ask him, hey, but if you really feel bad about this, why don't you pay compensation, pay reparations? And this is his response.
This is a murder. What about reparations in this area? I don't have it. I know people have opinions on both sides when it comes to reparations, but the things I'm focused on, that's just not cash payments to people. I think getting into trying to make cash payments to people, it divides the community on something that we really need to be united around.
So we had to put together, because we're dealing with the same system, right? 100 years that will not give us justice. We had to put together a legal team from people from all around the nation. Hopefully some of you will join us with us. And we filed this historic lawsuit back in September. And the great thing about our lawsuit is that we are actually following the exact path that the state of Oklahoma successfully used just a couple of years ago when it sued the opioid companies. And it's a public nuisance lawsuit. We're doing the exact same type of lawsuit. The state was successful to go back 40 years and show that the opioid companies created this nuisance that continues to this day. And we're saying, look, does Dred Scott still apply in Oklahoma or no? Because if Dred Scott is not the law of Oklahoma, we should get the same legal conclusions and consideration to at least move our case forward. So we filed for a public nuisance and we filed for unjust enrichment, because right now what's happening in Tulsa is that the city of Tulsa is utilizing the massacre as a brand for themselves. They've raised $30 million for themselves. They refuse to give any of that money to the survivors and their descendants, and we believe that's unjust enrichment. Our defendants, and my time is getting short, so I'm gonna go through this really quickly. We have the city of Tulsa, we have the Chamber of Commerce, the Tulsa Development Authority, Tulsa Metro Area Planning Commission, Tulsa County, the Tulsa office, the Sheriff's Department, and the Oklahoma Military Department. And we feel real good about our case. Now, when I say that, we all know, particularly us who do any civil rights work, any plaintiffs work, we know it's always an uphill battle. Oklahoma was Trump country 20 years ago. So, we're behind enemy lines here. This is a deep, deep, deep blood red state. But the fact of the matter is the law should be on our side. The facts should be on our side. And just as importantly, people like you are going to be on our side to make sure that the world is watching, that we can get the justice that we need in this particular case. So I just want to tell you some of the latest updates. We filed the case. We actually filed an amended petition, which is even stronger. And we did something that has never been done in 100 years on this issue. We had civil depositions. And this was extraordinary. These Black women, these 106-year-old Black women came out during a pandemic and faced down the very entities that destroyed their community. And they told for the first time under oath for the world to see and have forever how they remember as 6-year-olds, 5 and 6-year-old, 6 and 7-year-old children, seeing dead bodies in the streets, seeing homes on fire, hearing gunshots, hearing the planes dropping bombs from above, hearing and seeing their neighbors scream. They were able to recant the story and say how this impacted my life, impacted my family's life, how if this wouldn't have happened to me, how I believe I would have had such a better life. Both of these women at 106 years old during a pandemic, I know we're not together, but you need to clap for them anyway, because that was extraordinary for them to do that. And I was just honored to be able to stand on the shoulders of the people like Professor Ogletree and so many others in BC Franklin and present those depositions. And so that's why I feel like a miracle's already happened. I'm expecting a miracle for us to be successful. And how did the city of Tulsa respond to us filing our lawsuit? How did the city of Tulsa respond to knowing that there are 3 known living survivors who need justice? The city of Tulsa responds by lying to America. The city of Tulsa and their Tulsa Race Massacre Commission took out a full-page ad in the USA Today and said that Tulsa, Oklahoma is leading America's journey to racial healing. Now, anybody that knows anything about Tulsa, Oklahoma, know that we're at the bottom of anything to do with race. But that's the story that Tulsa wants to tell. That's the story that Tulsa wants to tell, that they're triumphing over and Greenwood is rising. But it's a lie. They're also trying to kick us out of court. Now, what's interesting is they say a lot of things publicly before we filed our lawsuit about how the massacre was bad and it's the cause of the disparities in our community. But in court, in their motion to dismiss, they say we had nothing to do with it. We had nothing to do with it. And so we want to hold the accountability to prove and have the opportunity to show that they had everything to do with it. Also, the city of Tulsa, we had to file a separate lawsuit on them for open records. The city of Tulsa stated that they wanted to be transparent and they wanted to let everyone know exactly what happened with the massacre. But when we asked for the records, they told us no. In fact, let me let you hear what the mayor of Tulsa said about being transparent.
We're not trying to pretend that something didn't happen. We're not trying to just say, oh, it's in the past. We are actively pursuing the truth on this, wherever it leads us. And we're doing that in a transparent way. The disparity and the lack of trust that exists is well earned by the city government and was developed over a century. So I don't expect that to go away very quickly. That's the whole reason we created this committee, was that we recognized at the outset that the city of Tulsa has not earned trust from Black Tulsans in particular on this issue. And so we want oversight. We want people pressing us and asking tough questions like we got tonight. We're not.
So, but when we asked, he said he wants oversight and the tough questions, but we asked the easy question. Just give us all your documents. They refused to do it. And they sent me an email and said, we're going to violate the open records law, even though you are a citizen of the city of Tulsa and you are entitled to these records, because I was suing the city. So basically, because I was a civil rights attorney, they retaliated against me and said, no, we're not going to give you these records. And we sued them for it. And so we're in current litigation on that issue. And so it just shows the reality of what's going on here in Tulsa. They want to try to look good. They want to try to say we're doing this and that. But when it comes down to justice, when it comes down to truth, when it comes down to reparations, they are hiding behind everything they can because they don't want people to know the truth about the city and what it's done and what it's doing to Black people. But we're not going to stop because these three survivors deserve it. These three survivors deserve everything we can provide to them and their descendants and our entire community. So we are so passionate about fighting for these individuals because, as David said, when you spent time with these survivors and you got to know their stories, you got to hear their stories. One of the things that just really crushed me, and I know this crushed Professor Ogletree because I used to talk to him about it all the time. You know, I got to go to DC with him on 4 or 5 occasions to do many things about this case. And we would talk about all the time. The survivors really believed, they thought, because for 75 years, there was a complete conspiracy of silence, right? No one talked about the massacre. I went to school on Greenwood Avenue in middle school and went all the way through K through 12 and never heard about the massacre until I went to OU. But the survivors really thought once that conspiracy of silence was broken and the Tulsa Race Massacre report came out in 2001, that once people knew what happened to them, once they knew the loss, once they understood the devastation, there was no way they would be denied justice. And so for them to be denied at the district court level, for them to be denied at the 10th Circuit, for them to be denied by the Supreme Court, and then to be denied by Congress, that was something that took a lot of those survivors finally over the edge and killed them. It broke their heart. It broke their heart. And the names, Wes Young was another person that David mentioned, you know, Dr. Olivia Hooker. I mean, the list goes on, people that was fighting until they died trying to get justice. And they would always say, we don't need anything for us, we're old, but we need it for our families and our community. We want Greenwood to be back what it was. And so I hope all of you will stand with us at the Justice for Greenwood Foundation. Stand with us for these three beautiful, amazing people. Make sure that these three people, that people know who they are, that people fight for them. Stand for Greenwood, because if we can be successful for these three people and get a win here in Greenwood, it sets the precedent for us to be successful nationally with other Greenwoods around the nation and for reparations as a whole. But if we can't win when we have three living survivors, how can we possibly win for these other historical atrocities that we're owed? So know the name of Hughes Van Ellis, know the name of Mother Fletcher, know the name of Mother Randall. Join with us at the Justice for Greenwood campaign. Help us get justice, help us get truth, help us get reparations. And I'll say this and I'll open it up for any questions. I think I have a couple minutes. We had one other survivor that was alive that was going to be a part of our litigation. His name was Hal Singer. Some of you may have heard of Hal Singer. He's a very famous jazz musician, worldwide known. He lived in France. He left America because of discrimination and because of what happened in Greenwood. He died 2 weeks before we filed our new case. And at the time in July, he was on hospice. He had a stroke. He was blind. And I was talking to his wife and I said, you know, do you think he still wants me to be calling him and trying to talk to him? And you know, she said, absolutely. Like, I actually offended her. She said, absolutely. He's going to fight for this until he dies. He's going to fight to vindicate his mother and his parents and his family. And she said, I'm going to send you a letter. And it was a letter that he actually wrote in 2007 to Professor Ogletree. And in the letter, he references how Johnny Cochran had just passed, and that, you know, he was very sad about that. He was sad that our legislation didn't go through. And he told Professor Ogletree, he said, you know, I must tell you, I've never had any faith in America's justice system for Black people because they're just not fair. And he said, you know, we're going to lose some battles, but we must continue to fight for our rights and our dignity. And that is what we're doing. We're fighting for the rights and dignity of the Hal Singers of the world, of the Otis Clarks of the world, or the Viola Fletchers of the world, and for the Dick Rowlands of the world, and for our entire community. So I invite all of you to join with us at the Justice for Greenwood Foundation and fight for the rights and dignity of Greenwood. Justice for Greenwood, justice for Greenwood, justice for Greenwood.
Thank you very much, Mario. As you can see, you can also go to justiceforgreenwood.org to support the movement with regard to the litigation and reparations. There are a couple of questions here in the Q&A. It said, would you comment on whether the Williams companies, the pipeline and energy company, are involved in the upcoming Tulsa Massacre Centennial Remembrance, if you know?
You know, I'm not specifically aware of any particular involvement at Williams. I wouldn't be surprised, but what I want to say and be very clear is that the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission is not Justice for Greenwood, okay? That is the city's fraudulent PR stunt where they're trying to whitewash what has happened here. And they've created this cultural tourism, Disneyland type experience where they want to bring people around the world. They want to lie to the American people, lie to Black people and say Greenwood is rising. They're using the hashtag Tulsa Triumphs, which is crazy because number one, Tulsa was not destroyed, Greenwood was destroyed. And who destroyed Greenwood? Tulsa did. So Tulsa did triumph over Greenwood. So why are you using that hashtag? Because it's a bait and switch. Just like after the massacre, Tulsa used it wasn't a hashtag at the time, but it was their slogan was Tulsa will. And they told the nation, well, Tulsa will rebuild Greenwood. And they actually told the nation, we don't even want you to send money in to the Black folks. In fact, when money was coming in for Black people from around the nation, Tulsa and the Chamber of Commerce sent the money back or used it for themselves. And so they're doing the exact same thing 100 years later. They're utilizing a public relations plan, and they want to talk about reconciliation and not reparations. They want to talk about healing and not truth. They want to talk about let's unify but not justice. And we understand that we must have truth, justice, reparations, then you can have reconciliation. But they want to skip steps. And so this is why I'm so passionately excited to tell my brothers and sisters at the National Bar Association that what the city of Tulsa is doing is not us. And it does not represent the survivors. It does not represent the community. In fact, we had to send a cease and desist letter on behalf of Mother Randall to the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission because they were falsely utilizing her name as if she was with them, as if they were representing her interests. When in fact, we asked them, they raised $30 million, and we asked them in writing, will you share some of that with the survivors and the descendants? And they said no. will you share some of the ongoing revenue for your museum with the survivors in the community? They said no. And so I just want to make it very clear. The Centennial Commission is not us. That is the city of Tulsa's whitewash attempt to make themselves look good.
Great, thank you. Another question is, how does any effort for reparations for survivors of the Tulsa Massacre, as well as the Tulsa Black community, compare to the efforts of Japanese reparations for internment of those citizens during World War II and their payment of reparations by Germany after World War II?
Well, I mean, it compares from a level of, there was a clear wrong, you know who was wrong, and you know who did the wrongdoing. So, you know, it should be repaid. But we all know as Black people, when it comes to us, the rules change and things get complicated, right? It's like, oh, well, how are we gonna do it? But the reality is, we know who was destroyed. Now, some people, like I said, we'll never know how many lives were lost. But for instance, we know all of the outstanding claims for those business owners. Like, we have them. And in fact, this is not part of my presentation, but I can share this with you. It's a really exciting update. We have identified about 12 insurance companies that are still operating today. And we have about 100 claims that those insurance companies are responsible for. And we have reached out to those insurance companies and said, hey, we want you to pay these claims at fair market, and not fair market, at today's dollars. And so we've also identified the 17 banks that were operating in Tulsa at the time, and who they're owned by two entities, Chase Bank and Bank of Oklahoma. And we know that Black people were not able to get their money out of the banks because their bank books burnt up. And so we're trying to get conversations with those banks also. And so, you know, we're owed, it's clear. And we say, just like the Japanese rightfully were paid, just like the Jewish brothers and sisters rightfully were paid, we want our people here in Greenwood to rightfully be paid reparations, which includes more than a check. It includes a check, but it includes so much more. It includes business opportunities. It includes scholarships. It includes tax abatement. It includes giving back the land that was stolen, like they're doing out in Manhattan Beach, California. Either you give the land back or you pay the fair market value. You provide mental and emotional trauma counseling for these families that are suffering with this generational trauma. So we have a whole litany of things that we're asking for, but make no mistake about it, they need to cut the check.
Agreed. The final question, and part of this may be incorporated in what you just shared with us, but will there be a strategy to get corporate America to pressure the city to make right?
Yes, I mean, and that's why justiceforgreenwood.org, please join up with us. We have a lot of great stuff going on. We have lawyers, we have academics, we have community folks, we have clergy, everyday people. And just for instance, I could just announce just today our new national partner. So we're partnered with Cheryl Eiffel at Legal Defense Fund, Brian Stevenson at EJI, Nicole Austin-Hillary at Human Rights Watch. And we just brought on our brand new national partner, which is Color of Change. And just today, they sent out a note to their 5 million membership, talking about this issue, calling upon the city of Tulsa and the commission to give that 80% of the dollars they've raised to the survivors and the community. And so all of you can join in on that. I can certainly disseminate that information to you, Taise, so you can get into the membership. And I'm hoping and believing that the National Bar will join us as a national member, fighting this fight, standing with us for justice for Greenwood.
Well, let me address that. That was going to be my only question. First of all, thank you, Demario, for your presentation. My only question is, what can the National Bar do? One, and then secondly, we have an upcoming, I think, knowledge is power, being able to get the information out to as many entities and as many people in the world is important. We have an upcoming international conference where we'll have people from all around the world. I'd love to have a session, a meeting, a seminar, a webinar, a something where perhaps we could include Because when you're 106, 107, and 100 years old, you have more years behind you than you have ahead of you. And it's great that you did. I guess I'm imagining it's a B'nai deposition where you preserve their testimony for, going forward. But I would love to honor them firstly, to galvanize support amongst our membership, and to spread the word through our remaining 2 conferences this year. And then we could also encourage, the incoming president, Carlos Moore, to do the same. But I think those are things immediately that we can do. And so, Taisha, if you could coordinate, Demaria, if that works for you, we'd be happy to do that. And if we need to send, letters or something like that, statements of support, we're happy to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Absolutely. We want to join with you. If I can say one other thing, I know I'm over my time. Our voice, they try to silence our voice all the time. Recently, the Oklahoma Bar Association asked me to write an article about the massacre and our work. I wrote it, I submitted it in, and they rejected it, said it was too strong, it was too partisan, it was too—
Yeah, whatever. But see, this is the thing. I know you don't have an expectation that anyone is going to want to hear what you're saying, because that's the fight that we have as Black lawyers, and that's the fight of the NBA. So what I say to Oklahoma, whatever, the National Bar wants to hear you, and our reach is broader. So let's integrate you in our conferences, in our network, and what we do, and let's see if we can get the administration's attention on this. I mean, the Justice Department, this seems like we're investigating all kinds of stuff today. Maybe this is something that we can get the Justice Department to investigate. And I always say, you never know until you ask. So I know our time is tight, but I just wanted to assure you of our support on the National Bar level. You're preaching to the choir. I just remember that song, Who Dropped the Bomb on Me, or You Dropped the Bomb on Me. And there was all this controversy. Well, it wasn't about Black Wall Street. It was, of course it wasn't about Black Wall Street and a bomb being dropped and destroying our community. It doesn't matter what the Gap Band said. I mean, I think that's what it is. And they grew up in this community, as I understood it.
Gap Band stands for Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
Right. So we get it, we understand it, and we want to help, and just count on the support of the National Bar.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Charles Hamilton Houston Center.
Absolutely. And please, we honored Professor Ogletree not too long ago, and we are always with him. And his wife accepted he was right there, but his wife did accept on his behalf. And we will continue to honor, elevate, and pray for him because he will always be part of the fabric of the National Bar Association. So thank you, Mr. Harris, for your contribution and for your comments. And so I know that Taisha is looking at me because we have to pivot now to the recognition of our living legends.
Thank you. And at this time, we will turn the program over to Taise Dempsey.
I have the honor of introducing Judge Shauna Graves Robertson. Judge Robertson has sat as a Salt Lake County Justice Court Judge for 22 years. As a member of the History Makers, she is the only African-American female judge ever appointed or elected to serve in the state of Utah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can we repeat that again? And I promise you, I will not interrupt anymore, but we just have to repeat that again. And I'm going to put my phone on, I'm going to put it on mute and that's it, but we just have to repeat that.
Absolutely. Judge Shauna Graves Robertson, a member of the History Makers. She is the only African-American female judge ever appointed or elected to serve in the state of Utah. She was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, a product of the public school system, graduating from West High School in 1976. She graduated from Arizona State University in 1980 with a Bachelor's of Science degree in criminal justice. As an undergraduate, she participated in the Washington Semester Program through American University in Washington District of Columbia. While living in DC, she worked for Senator Orrin Hatch, and it was there where she gained her love for the law. She received a Master's of Arts in Public Administration in 1987 and a Juris Doctor in 1990 from the University of Utah. Judge Graves Robertson is a Silver Star and a life member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She's a life member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She's the chairman of the Utah Supreme Court Community Relations Committee and the 49th chairman of the National Bar Association Judicial Council. She is a member of the advisory board of the National Consortium of Racial and Ethnic Fairness in the Courts. She holds memberships in the American Bar Association, National Association of Women Judges, the Women Lawyers of Utah, Utah Minority Bar Association, and the Utah Women's Forum. In addition to her judicial role, she has provided organizational training and consulting services in the areas of diversity and empowerment to major corporations and organizations throughout the United States and Canada since 1991. For her dedicated service to the citizens of the state of Utah, in 2007, she received the Racial Justice Award from the Young Women's Christian Association. In 2007, the Martin Luther King Jr. Drum Major Award in 2008 from the MLK Statewide Commission and from the Iota chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, the Social Justice Civil Rights Award in 2013. The 2014 Meritorious Service Award from the Ogden branch of the NAACP, an Honorary Doctor of Humane Letters from Salt Lake City Community College in 2017, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Service Award, Salt Lake Branch, NAACP 2018. Judge Robertson is a member of the Calvary Baptist Church, where she has lent her voice as a member of the Inspirational Choir for over 44 years. She is married to her best friend, John E. Robertson, and the couple have 3 daughters, Jacinta Robertson Love, Jordan and Joey Robertson, and 2 grandchildren, Journey and Jackson Love. I'm happy to introduce to you one of Region 10's living legends, Judge Shauna Graves Robinson.
Thank you, Taise. Thank you very much. What an honor. I want to say how pleased I am not only to receive this award, but how pleased I am to be a member of this organization. President Hoffler, you have taken up the gauntlet at a time when other organizations were scurrying. You simply pivoted and you have taken us through this online year, and I applaud you. Taise, you have been yourself a stalwart member of Region 10, carrying us forward. And before you, Shamara, Region 10 may be small, but we are mighty. And we know that although some trails have been blazed, it's obvious that there are far more paths that we need to work on before we can say that we have reached the pinnacle of success. Thank you very much.
Thank you and congratulations to Judge Shauna Graves Robertson. At this time, I turn the program over to Aja Brooks, the president of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be able to introduce and recognize our first Black judge on the Court of Appeals and our first Black dean of our law school. So these are definitely living legends. I just want to mention very briefly, I know I don't have a lot of time, but we were talking about, Tulsa and how amazing the Black community was there and self-sufficient. People don't really know that in New Mexico, we had a very similar situation. We had a town called Blackdom, which was the first all Black settlement in New Mexico. It was incorporated in 1903. They had a school, a post office. They were self-sufficient. They were running on their own. George W. Malone, who was a teacher in Blackdom, his wife was a postmaster. Her name was Bessie. He went on to become the first Black person admitted to the State Bar of New Mexico, and that was in 1916. So we do have some very rich Black history here in New Mexico. DeMario was saying, remember these names, remember the name of George Malone, because he made history in our state. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Shamara Henderson. Shamara Henderson serves as a judge on the New Mexico Court of Appeals. She has the first Black judge on the Court of Appeals. She has an extensive career fighting for New Mexicans in their time of need, protecting our civil rights, and ensuring everyone has their fair day in the legal system. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham appointed her to the New Mexico Court of Appeals in February 2020. She ran in the 2020 election to keep her seat on the bench, becoming the first Black appellate judge and Black woman to hold a statewide seat in New Mexico. She was appointed to the court after the bipartisan Judicial Nominating Commission found her qualified and recommended her to the governor. Born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Judge Henderson graduated from Valley High School. She received a bachelor's degree in political science and philosophy from American University in Washington, D.C. She received her JD from the University of New Mexico School of Law. After graduating from law school, she clerked for Justice Charles W. Daniels at the New Mexico Supreme Court. Judge Henderson started her career as a litigator, as a prosecutor with the 2nd Judicial District Attorney's Office in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where she prosecuted DWI, DUI, and domestic violence cases. She later became the Associate General Counsel for the Office of the Governor. She advised the governor's office on legal matters ranging from pardons and paroles to criminal legislation, environmental legislation, and higher education. In 2011, she joined the United States Attorney's Office for the District of New Mexico. There, she prosecuted reactive narcotics, bank robberies, and other burglaries, and identification fraud, violent cases, and criminal civil rights cases, involving issues like excessive force, hate crimes, and reproductive rights. Alongside her duties as a federal prosecutor, she engaged in extensive outreach with the community and law enforcement to ensure the best allocation of finite resources. In 2017, she co-founded her own law firm, Henderson and Groman, PC. She successfully appealed a race-based detention order for her African-American client that resulted in his release, dismissed criminal cases based on discovery violations, and successfully settled multiple plaintiff injury cases in New Mexico. Henderson and Groman joined Friedman, Boyd, Hollander, Goldberg, Urias, and Ward in October of 2018. At Friedman, she practiced in the areas of criminal defense, plaintiff's injury, employment discrimination, civil rights, and witness representation. She presented throughout the country and internationally on issues regarding affirmative litigation, trial skills, e-discovery, and use of electronically stored information. Judge Henderson has received a number of awards, including the National Bar Association Nation's Best Advocate 40 Lawyers Under 40 Award, the University of New Mexico School of Law Alumni Promise Award, and the University of New Mexico Black Alumni Trailblazer Award. She is extremely involved in the community. A few of her organizations include the University of New Mexico Alumni Association, the Albuquerque chapter of the Links Incorporated, the Iota Xi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and the UNM School of Law Alumni Board, of which she is a past president. She's also a past president, many years, of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association, And she's also a past board member at large of the National Bar Association. So I know that's a long introduction, but Judge Henderson has always served her fellow New Mexicans as a lawyer and now as a judge. We are so happy that Region 10 and the National Bar Association has decided to recognize her for her accomplishments.
Thank you so much, Asia. I appreciate that introduction. And thank you, President Hoffler. I'm just going to mimic my speech as planned, how wonderful you have been for this organization this past year. Living in a pandemic with everything else that we've been going through as a community, as a people, as Black lawyers and judges in this country, I salute you for what you've been able to do with our organization this past year. As a former national board member, Region 10 director, I understand just how much work it takes. And so I really appreciate everything that you've done. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not thank Taise Dempsey for stepping up and continuing in her role as Region 10 director. As been noted, we are small, but we are mighty. The Black community is very strong in Region 10. And we always pop up and show up to the NBA and prove that year after year. My age is always pointed out, and I take that as a compliment. I actually turned 39 this summer during the NBA annual convention, which is normal. I usually spend my birthday at our conventions. And to me, that is living proof that you can do whatever you want and you can achieve whatever your dreams are, no matter what your age is. Whether it's young or older, you can always achieve your dreams. As long as you believe in yourself, you work hard, and you always show up. I know that I did not do this on my own. Dean Mathewson, who's a co-honoree this evening, I still remember the conversation where he told me, you're gonna be an appellate judge one day. When I was in law school, I believe I was a 3L. And I remember being like, this man is crazy. I don't know about all that. But here I am today as the first Black appellate judge in the state of New Mexico. And he was certainly one of the first people I called when I started considering that position, and has been an amazing mentor and supporter of me. Two other people I wanted to mention are judges Tommy Duel and Angela Duel. Tommy being the first Black judge in the state of New Mexico, Angela being the first woman district judge in New Mexico. These are two people who have been founders of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association, and have been a foundation of which I've been able to stand on their shoulders. And just so many people here in New Mexico that have been amazing, that have supported me. And I know that I wouldn't be here but for them, that the community that we have in New Mexico and the MBA community that supported me for at least 15 years now. So I really do appreciate all of you. Thank you for this award.
And now I'm doubly honored because I get to introduce the first Black dean of our law school here in New Mexico, the University of New Mexico School of Law, Dean Alfred Dennis Mathewson. Dean Mathewson is an emeritus professor of law and former co-dean of the University of New Mexico School of Law. As dean, he chaired judicial selection commissions for the state of New Mexico. He has also served as the University of New Mexico interim chief legal counsel. Prior to joining the faculty at the University of New Mexico in 1983, he practiced in the fields of corporate, banking, and securities law in Denver, Colorado. He earned his BBA from Howard University in 1975 and his JD from Yale University in 1978. From 2009 to 2014, he directed the UNM Africana Studies program. From 1997 through 2002, he served as the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at the UNM School of Law. Dean Emeritus Mathewson is a member of the American Bar Association, American Law Institute, National Bar Association, and National Black Lawyers Top 100. He is a fellow of the American Bar Foundation and member of the board of the UNM Retirees Association, as well as the KWH Law Center for Social Justice and Change. He has served as the president of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association and the Sam Carey Bar Association in Denver. He is a member and past chair of the section on law and sports of the American Association of Law Schools. He was selected as the Business Lawyer of the Year in 2009 by the State Bar of New Mexico for his efforts in developing business and tax law clinic at the University of New Mexico School of Law. He has published so many articles on sports law and spoken at law schools across the country, including in Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Wake Forest, West Virginia. The list goes on. And his publications go on as well. One of them was his article, Major League Baseball's Monopoly Power and the Negro Leagues. And that's listed in the Harvard Guide to African American History. He is known nationally for his work on the application of Title IX to African American female athletes. As a lawyer, law professor, and scholar, his talents and experience are community resources. In 2014, he assembled a team of law students to provide presentations on the processes for community input into the approval of the settlement agreement between the U.S. Department of Justice and the City of Albuquerque on reforms relating to the use of force by the police department. He subsequently formed a team of lawyers who filed an amicus brief in federal court on behalf of several community organizations, now known as the Community Coalition, in the fairness hearing on the agreement. He continues, along with Representative Antonio Maestas, to represent the Community Coalition in the proceedings. That work has led to his participating in the Interdisciplinary Working Group on Algorithmic Justice, a collaborative effort among computer scientists, political scientists, and legal scholars from the UNM Computer Science, Political Science, Law School, Center for Policy, Social Policy, and the Santa Fe Institute. The group identifies mathematical, computational, political, and legal implications of algorithms and data that determine the fate of people in the criminal justice system and other public sectors. The group's comment on a proposed HUD rule on disparate impact claims was featured in Forbes magazine. Dean Emeritus Mathewson is a native of Tarboro, North Carolina. I hope I said that right, Dean Mathewson. I went to school at Wake Forest in North Carolina, and so I know there's a specific way to say Tarboro. He graduated from Bertie High School in 1971 and was a proud member of its 1970 North Carolina State Championship basketball team. In 2015, he received an honorary diploma from the W.A. Patillo National Alumni Association, and in 2020 was selected by its Hall of Fame committee to be inducted into its Distinguished Graduate Chapter. I am so honored that our own Dean Mathewson is receiving this award tonight because he is a true living legend. Thank you.
I remembered to unmute that time. I would say President Hoffler and Regional Director, I'm losing my mind because I'm looking at the wrong side, Dempsey. I think that's right. I want to say thank you for the award. And Demaria, I appreciated that presentation. And you talked about strong, powerful women. It looks like strong, powerful members of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And I'm married to one, so maybe I get some props of that. So I want to say, I really do appreciate the award. I do my work, though, not for recognition. To me, the reward of the awards you receive is in seeing things happen and looking to see that. And so that's been something that I've always paid attention. Recognition is fine. I like to make sure that other people get recognition. And so it's nice to be in the spotlight for a moment. I can say that normally, most often, I attend these things watching my wife receive awards. And some people in Albuquerque only know me as the husband of Pamela Herndon. So it's nice to have this. I have something to show my kids. We have some amazing kids. And so this is an opportunity to make them proud for something. I do take a lot of pride in students and the students that we produced and have turned out in the time that I have been here. a judge. I want to make it Justice Henderson. That's going to happen. But yes, Judge Shamara Henderson. Is so glad to be on the same ceremony and the same award with you. Really pleased to see that happen. But I was touched by the presentation, and I do want to mention the names Mother Fletcher, Hugh Van Ellis, and was it Mother Randall, to say them and put them on my mind. I do think that this is one of many things happening in the country, and we have work to do. And so, yes, I closed the chapter when I retired, but all I did was change my legal relationship with the university. So I'm still connected, but now I get to spend my time as a community resource. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And thank you so much for this. I think my wife might keep me a little while longer.
Hey man, I'm married to an AKA too, and so I got it. I understand.
Lastly, I would like to honor our last Region 10 living legend. Although he couldn't be here with us this evening, I will accept this honor on his behalf, and I still like to acknowledge him by reading his bio. Justice Tom Colbert, the first African American to serve on the Supreme Court of Oklahoma, was born in Oklahoma City. He graduated from Sapulpa High School, earned an associate's degree from Eastern Oklahoma State College in 1970, and a Bachelor of Science degree from Kentucky State University in 1973. While at Kentucky State, Justice Colbert was named an All-American in track and field. Justice Colbert served in the United States Army and received an honorable discharge in 1975. He earned a Master's of Education degree from Eastern Kentucky University in 1976 and taught in the public schools in Chicago. Justice Colbert received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Oklahoma in 1982. He was an assistant dean at Marquette University Law School from 1982 to 1984, and an assistant district attorney in Oklahoma County from 1984 to 1986, before entering private law practice at Miles LaGrange and Colbert from 1986 to 1989. Justice Colbert continued his practice until under the name Colbert and Associates from 1989 to 2000. He also served as an attorney for the Oklahoma Department of Human Services from 1988 to 89 and in 1999. In March of 2000, Justice Colbert became the first African American appointed to the Oklahoma Court of Civil Appeals. He was appointed by Governor Frank Keating. He served as Chief Judge of that court in 2004. On October 7, 2004, Governor Brad Henry appointed Justice Colbert to the Supreme Court of Oklahoma. In January 2011, Justice Colbert was sworn in as the first African American Vice Chief Justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court. And on January 1st, 2013, Justice Colbert became the first African American to be sworn in as Chief Justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Justice Colbert is a member of the American Bar Association, the National Bar Association, the Oklahoma Bar Association, and the Tulsa County Bar Association. He participates in the Track and Field Master's Level, a mentoring program for young men, and a summer reading program for children, and is a frequent speaker at schools. Justice Colbert has been honored with many distinguished awards, such as Tulsa Community College Service Award, Eastern Oklahoma State College Hall of Fame, Thurgood Marshall Award of Excellence, OU Black Alumni Society Trailblazer Award, Kentucky State University Athletic Hall of Fame, Black Heritage Trailblazer Award, St. Louis Gateway Classic Sports Foundation Lifetime Achievement Award, NABCJ Oklahoma Criminal Justice Hall of Fame, HBCU Awards, Male Alumnus of the Year, Oklahoma Association of Community College Hall of Fame, Oklahoma City County Historical Society Pathmaker Award, the Urban League Valona P. Cutler Award, and the Ada Lois Scipio Fisher Diversity Award. Justice Colbert retired from the Oklahoma Supreme Court on February 1st, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taise. I just wanted to take this opportunity prior to President Hoffler giving her closing remarks to just remind everyone about the International Summit and some of the CLEs that will be offered during that time from May 12th to May 14th. Some of the CLEs that will be offered are Force, Police Reform, A Three-Legged Stool, Africa and the Caribbean Region, Bridging the Diaspora Through International Trade and Investment, as well as a candid discussion on workplace inclusion, empowering and connecting women through the pandemic and beyond. And there will also be an award ceremony honoring different members of our legal community. Again, just a reminder that the registration for the 3-day summit is $49 and that it is free to students. So please spread the word. And if you wish to register, to go to the website at nationalbar.org. Thank you. And I turn the program over back again to President Hoffler. Thank you all for your time.
Well, Taisha, thank you so much for putting together this wonderful program, along with our Region 10 Director, Taise Dempsey. I think I mispronounced it. Please forgive me. And my first name is Tricia. And when I tell you, people call me Drusilla, Teresita, Priscilla, and everything. So I try to make it my business not to mispronounce names. So please accept my apologies. And is it Aja Brooks? Thank you for those magnificent introductions. And I just want to just say a few words about where we go from here. So, Demario, we talked about the NBA supporting your efforts. That's done. We're going to include it. I sent a little text while you were talking. I said, we just need to do what we need to do. And we need to make it where it is something that the NBA always supports, because you got a fight ahead of you that's going to be more than just 1 year. I wanted to recognize Maurice Foster, who's our interim executive director, who's done an incredible job. So many things. We've known him for years and years and years and decades, Maurice. And we thank you for your work that you've done. And then I just want to share a couple of quick stories with you all, just to end out the program. So about 12 or maybe even 14 years ago, my children were 4 and 2. And there was a lovely, beautiful, brilliant young woman by the name of Jordan Robertson, who was their first love. I have 2 children. And at an MBA conference, I used to have this traveling caravan, double stroller, briefcase on wheels coming to the convention. My husband and I, we were just navigating. But this brilliant, young, beautiful woman babysat my children at the conference. And Judge Grace Robertson, it was your daughter. They were in love with your daughter. They couldn't live. When I came back, because they were babies, to say, Mommy's home, they were like, yeah, well, they just wanted Jordan. Jordan. My youngest couldn't even say Jordan. He was saying, but just loved your daughter. So thank you, because that's the NBA tradition, where we help each other. And Lord knows I needed help. I needed a break. We wanted to go to some events and your daughter was there. I think one time we got back at 3, 4 in the morning and my kids were just so delighted, just hugged up with her. So thank you. Thank you for raising magnificent children. When we talk about living legends, people often think, well, they have to be of a certain stage in life. But what Judge Henderson reminds us is, when you achieve and do such great things at a young age, you must be recognized as well in a magnificent way. And so thank you. You know, at 39, if this is what you're doing, I say I'm 37, by the way, just as an aside, been in practice 34 years, but at 39, we fully expect great things from you in the future. And as the National Bar Association, we will elevate you, be right there beside you, behind you, because you need to know that you have an extraordinary institution that will continue to be at your side. In fact, for all the living legends. But I just wanted to make that point. David Wilmot, when we were in law school at Georgetown, was our Dean Matheson. He was the first Black dean. He did so much. And in fact, Dean, that's how I know about you. Because there were very few of you in the country that were making a difference for us law students who, let's just face it, law school is no cup of tea. It's not exciting. You know, we forge some great alliances and relationships, but for the African-American deans who are there fighting for us every single day, all the time, we probably would not have made it through in the same way. You all are our saviors. You help with financial aid. You help us with family crises. You make sure we have books. You make sure we can survive. And there's no substitution for that. So Dean, we thank you for that. And for Justice Colbert reminds me of yesteryears, a time in my life when I thought I was a track and field star. You see, I went to school in Toronto, high school in Toronto, Canada. A little private school, a Scottish school at that. And I was undefeated. I went from grades 9 to 13 in the private school circuit. And I remember telling my mom, Mommy, because you know how people pump you up. They said I can go to the Olympics. This is my mother's reaction. Yeah, let's just stay on the honor roll. You can do all things, but let's just stay on the honor roll. And I said, yeah, I'm gonna stay on the honor roll. But they said I can go to the Olympics. Well, undefeated for 4 years from grade 9 to 13, I'd skipped a year until, in the private school circuit, I still hold the record, until we did a province-wide meet, meaning the public schools and the private schools were competing. And I, because I was going to a little Scottish school, I had on bloomers, little green bloomers, a kilt, a like white shirt and a tie, some green socks and Oxfords, meaning black, completely ugly shoes. We couldn't wear makeup and we could only wear post earrings. So this was during the era of FloJo with the nails and makeup. And so I go to this province-wide meeting, you know, I'm undefeated. Ain't but 3 or 4 Black girls anyway in the school, but I'm undefeated in the whole circuit and I'm feeling some kind of way, you know, like I'm gonna win because I'm undefeated. And when I get there, well, we have FloJo looking sisters there. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, I'm undefeated and whatnot. They got so much makeup and earrings and everything. And they're looking at me because I'm telling you, I am certain I looked a hot mess in bloomers, in a kilt, with a tie, with Oxford. And what we did when we competed, we just took our skirt off because we had bloomers under it. So what you need to understand is I competed with bloomers on. And we had on a little t-shirt. When I say a hot mess, Lord Jesus, when I see the pictures, I said, did somebody not say this looks crazy? But anyway, for the first time ever, I found myself lost in the dust, as in the dust, when those sisters beat me handsomely. And I came in 3rd place. And I remembered what my mother said, which was, yeah, let's just focus on the honor roll. And that's what I did. I focused on the honor roll. So when I think of Justice Colbert, who is a track and field star, who people know throughout the country as that, but more importantly, who know him as a trailblazer, like our National Bar members, the first justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, much like Peggy Quinn's the first justice, female justice of the Florida Supreme Court, much like Justice Johnson in Louisiana. And you all know that these justices had to fight legal battles to claim the place that they should have had naturally. and fight to stay there. So to Justice Colbert, who couldn't make it, I salute you. I thank you. We're recording this, so hopefully he will get a chance to hear how much we revere him and in bringing him into the living legend grouping, which all of you are. Now, what does it mean to be a living legend of the National Bar Association? We have the Hall of Fame, and that's true. That's something that we've always had. But I believe being recognized as a living legend says something different. It says that you are every single day living and making a difference. And for that, we thank you. We revere you. We elevate you. We salute you. And we will always have your back. So thank you, Taisha. Thank you to Priscilla and Kyle, to Ms. Dempsey, to Demario, to Ms. Brooks, to Judge Henderson, to Maurice Foster, to Dean Matheson, and to Judge Graves Robertson. Thank you. And for all the other people, just know that the National Bar is taking its rightful place, and we just gonna fight, Demario. Just know we're gonna fight, because that's what we do. Gonna tell us that we don't have a voice. And I know when they said that to you, that didn't make a difference at all. In fact, it probably doubled your enthusiasm for ensuring that your voice is heard. So thank you all. Thank you.
Wrote an op-ed about it.
Wrote an op-ed. You see, we write an op-ed about it, or we can write a song about it. But either way, we're going to be heard. And that's the fight and the struggle that we do as National Bar Association lawyers. So thank you all. Thank you to everyone. And let's keep the struggle alive. Because it's Oklahoma, I've got to end with "La luta continua, victoria es certa." The struggle continues, but victory is certain. Bye-bye. Thank you.